RotoGrinders. Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. Blender Ed, Blender HD, if you want to follow me on Twitter. And it's Wednesday, August 30th, and we're finishing up our NFL DFS primer series here. Last week, we talked all about projection, correlation, leverage, little bits of the combinatorics and nuances of NFL DFS with the first main slate coming up a week and a half from now. Actually, the first slate on Thursday, we got a showdown slate. We talked a little bit about that also. So go check out the past couple of shows. You'll see them being tagged as NFL DFS Primer on the title as well as on the thumbnail. If you've missed some of them, but today we'll be talking more about Lineup HQ. Yesterday went into some of the basic features of our lineup builder here at RotoGrinders, which also contains all the projections, all the information. It's kind of your one-stop shop for all the information that you'll need to build your lineups on Sunday morning, on Saturday night, the night before, whatever you want to do in NFL DFS, whether it be the main slate, the afternoon slate, the showdown slates, everything. So give me a thumbs up. Hit the thumb button in the morning. Got the early birds here. Got baseball later today on the channel. Hit that notification bell to know when we go live. So we talked yesterday about all the functions and the player screens and everything like that. Of course, you could get this if you're a combo premium member, right? Get everything, right? You could get the obviously NFL only if you want, but why not get everything? Get the college sports, get the NBA, MLB, get MMA, get everything, right? Click on that link in the description, get $10 off your first month. But one of the things that you're going to be doing a lot in your lineups for NFL is taking advantage of correlation. You know, making sure your lineups could be somewhat correlated, very correlated, game stacks, team stacks, right? If you don't use any type of stacking functionality, you're going to just get it's going to be treated just like NBA, right? All a lineup builder is a knapsack problem solver for this, median mean fantasy points column. But let's say, you're looking, especially that for the biggest total game is that the Dolphins Chargers game. So if we go over and click over to there and you're like, okay, I want to build lineups that have like stacks of this game or stacks of the Dolphins, stacks of the Chargers, right? Herbert, Tua, I want to have that type of lineup. How do I tell the lineup HQ builder to build those types of lineups, right? Maybe it's not only Miami, LA that you want. Maybe you want some Jalen Hurts stacks. Maybe you want some Kirk Cousins, Jefferson type stacks. Maybe you want the Cincinnati Cleveland game. Maybe you want some Joe Burrow in there, right? So how do you go in? Are you going to have to make groups for all of that? I mean, we can. I'll show some of the more detailed stuff you could do with groups. But for the most part, you're going to be stacking quarterbacks with wide receivers. If you're targeting games, you're going to do like quarterback with two pass catchers or two teammates with one or two guys on the other side of the game. Well, how could we get Lineup HQ to do just that? Well, we have a stacks page, okay? We have primary game stacks, second game stacks, third game stacks. If you want to incorporate multiple correlations into your lineup. Do you need to? No, you don't need to. Probably the primary one probably is beneficial. Quarterback, wide receiver. If you did that's probably beneficial, except for maybe some quarterbacks like Justin Fields or Jalen Hurts, who could, score a lot of rushing touchdowns also. So all you have to do is go to the stacks page, the quick game stacks, right? We also have the game stack finder where you could specify it specifically, like the exact players in your stack, right? And it'll look at it for you. So like number of stacks, 20, right? Find stacks. It could show you like Burrow, Chase, Cousins, Jefferson. And you could add that, right? I could add that. It'll show up here and you could give a percentage of what your exposure to that, right? So you could do specific stacks of specific players, specific two players, right? It'll show you game stack finder. What do you want? Same team players, opposing team players. You could do this if you want to get really, really detailed. What you could also do if I get rid of this, is use the quick game stacks. Quick game stacks. You add a primary stack. So you see here. See, team 1, use. Team 2, use. So if, let's say, I wanted a quarterback with a pass catcher, a wide receiver, or a tight end, and that's it, and no one from the opposing team. Well, I could put this in. I could select what teams they apply to, right? And then target this rule for X percent of your lineup. So let's say you want just a standard quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, the type of correlation, and you want it in 25% of your lineups. That's what you would do. But you could also add another one. I could add another one. It'll go underneath it. Let's say I want quarterback with 2 pass catchers, right? 2 wide receiver tight ends. Maybe you don't mind with the running back also. 2 running back, wide receiver tight ends. You just put the number 2 in there. Maybe you want quarterback with 2 wide receiver tight ends and then 1 player, running back, wide receiver, or tight end from the opposing team to build a little bit of a game stack. You could go even further. You could do 2 of those players. You could do 3 of those players. You could go into this and go, I want to make sure that it's 1 wide receiver and 1 tight end instead of possibly 2 wide receivers, depending on the team. So if we take a look, let's say we get rid of this. So let's say we take a look and we go, okay, we're gonna build little mini game stacks, right? Of 3 guys on one side of the game and 2 guys on the other side of the game, right? So maybe you do quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, and then 2 players from the opposing team, 25% of your lineups. We could look through if there's certain teams that you don't want a game stack of. You could exclude them. You could not include them in here. So maybe, just like we said before, okay, we want a game stack Cincinnati, Cleveland, game stack Miami, Chargers, right? Maybe Tampa Bay, Minnesota, or something like that. Maybe if that's what you want. Maybe you don't want to stack the game stack of the Cardinals Commanders game. Maybe you don't mind a correlate. Like if you play that game, you're going to have, quarterback, wide receiver, or something like that, but maybe not a full game stack. So you could go in here and you could apply this to just whatever games that you want, whatever teams that you want. In the primary game stack section, the teams are all tied to the quarterback because this is the only game stack that includes a quarterback. When we get to the other ones, they don't. So you have to put in a primary thing here. And then you have to set up what percentage of lineups do you want this type of construction to entail. So for ease of use, we're just going to put this as 100, right? So we're building Minnesota, Tampa Bay, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Miami, LA game stacks in our build. Let's say we're looking in 20 lineups. So who knows? We could also build in a second correlation, right? Right? We could always also build in, if we play a running back from one side of the game, we play a wide receiver or a tight end from the opposite side of the game or something like that. Or just 2 players from each side of the game. Wide receiver, tight end, with a running back, wide receiver, tight end. Each side of the game. You could secondary stack. You could play 2 from one side, 1 from the other. You could also put in a running back DSD correlation if you'd like. But always remember with the running back DSD correlation, people look and go, oh, they're correlated. They're correlated at the mean. Ceiling-wise, they're not really. Right? And when you're playing GPPs, when the running back, because the running back in the fourth quarter is going to get a whole bunch of carries when they're up by 3 touchdowns, right? The game's 28 to 10 in the fourth quarter, which means they're going to be running the ball a lot more, typically. Well, that's correlated to points allowed, but not necessarily the ceiling of DSD scoring. It's not necessarily correlated to the DSD getting a return touchdown and a pick 6 in the same game. To some extent, maybe, but so it's not to the mean. Yeah, running back score does well. The defense scores 10 points. Okay, that's fine. But those 20+ point scores by defenses, really, the running back doesn't have to do all that much. It has to do with it, right? It's a lot of variance in DST. But you can if you want. If you want to add the third even, you could go running back and DST of the same team, right? You could have that. And as many lineups, I mean, you could do multiple ones. You could add a third and a second correlation and have, as long as the percentages add up to 100, like you're good to go. Right? So let's say this is what the types of lineups. We want to build game stacks of any of these three games and also include a little mini, one player from each side of a game, and then also have a running back DST combination. Now, Lineup HQ, as a knapsack problem solver, how do I find you the lineups that have that with the highest mean projection? And then it also goes by all your other builder rules, right? So you can put in, all your randomness, all your unique players, all your exposures of each player. You could do all of that also. So let's do 20 lineups with all defaults or whatever. It doesn't matter. So based on this primary, second, third game stack, so we're going to get at least some of every, depending on the projection, maybe you don't get much out of 20 lineups. Maybe the highest projected, Miami Chargers comes up, in all 20 lineups, right? One way of making sure that you get, whatever the stacks, the heads of the stacks that you want is using the quarterback exposure to do that for you. So what I'm saying is that you go in, you go to quarterback, right? So basically we're stacking three games in this thing, right? So we get Cincinnati, Cleveland, Tampa Bay, Minnesota, right? And then Miami Chargers, right? We take a look at this and we go, okay, well, how much of each do we want? Because we're going to, out of our 20 lineups, we're going to get, it's possible we get 20 Deshaun Watson lineups. Well, what happens if you just don't want all of them to be Cleveland stacks? Because that still satisfies the condition of giving you 100% of a game stack of one of those three games. So maybe you set the maxes. You say, well, Deshaun, I don't want more than 10%. I'd rather have more Burrow, right? So 20% of Burrow. Maybe you have 20% Herbert, 20% Tua, right? You could do this, 20%, 10%, right? You only want 10% of Watson and 10% of Mayfield, even less, or something like that. You can just control it here, control it by the heads of the quarterback, right? So maybe you want more Herbert than Tua. Maybe you want more Tua than Herbert. Maybe you want more Burrow than, maybe you don't want any, hey, maybe you don't want any Baker Mayfield. You could just X them out, right? So max 5 even, right? We put that down to max 5. I want more Burrow than Watson, right? Something like that. You can control it that way. And of course, have it add up to 100. 25, 45, 65, or a little bit past 100. Gives it a little wiggle room. Because if you just leave it to the stacks page, it's going to be like, what's the best available combination of players that I could do all of this, as long as it's a stack of one of these three games. So maybe you just get all 20. You get all 20 Deshaun Watson Brown stacks. So using the quarterback position as a way to control your exposure to stacks. Now, every Burrow stack may include Chase and not Higgins. You'll have to do more in order to get more diversity or change your exposures to that if you want to. So let me build 20 lineups. And as with anything in Lineup HQ, the more rules that you put in, the slower it goes, right? 20 lineups, typically it's going to take what? 10 seconds? 15 seconds? But just understand, I'm going to try to stack all these games and all these exposures and all these settings and everything like that. Give yourself some time. It could take a couple of minutes. Don't leave yourself, the 12:57 or something, and then you're building. Especially with so many other people also doing the same thing. Okay, so we're not really concern ourselves with our player exposure. We get a lot of Zach Moss as a one-off. Of course, these are projections from we're a week and a half before, so these projections are going to change. We don't even know what the hell the Colts are even going to do. Right, so you can see here, we could even go by You could sort by team stack, right? We got 5 Bengals, 4 Chargers, 4 Dolphins, 4 Vikings, 2 Browns, 1 Buccaneers. Exactly what we set our maxes to get this. So we get Watson, Elijah Moore, and then you get 2 on the other side. Higgins, Chase on the other side. You got Watson, Moore, Cooper. Right, here's David Njoku, right? You have Watson, you get a 3-2 lineup. You got Higgins and Chase on the other side. Higgins and Chase on the other side. Higgins and Chase, Burrow, Higgins, Chase on the other side. Right, so you get all these. Then you get Herbert, Mike Williams, Gerald Everett with Waddle and Hill on the other side. Here's another Burrow. Here's a Burrow. Here's a Burrow. Here's a Herbert. Herbert, Williams, Everett with Tyreek Hill and Durham Smythe on the other side. Right, so you look through here and you can see it conforms to your stack settings. Kirk Cousins, TJ Hockenson, Justin Jefferson with Rashad White and Chris Godwin on the other side. There you go, game stack. Now you start looking at these lineups and you look at this first lineup and you go, well, Higgins and Chase are pretty expensive, right? So if they both get there, it's more likely that Burrow is the top quarterback than Watson is, right? So sometimes you see same thing with Hill and Waddle. You go, if I have both Hill and Waddle in my lineup, I'd much rather have Herbert there I'd rather have Tua there than Herbert. Right? You take a look at some of these lineups and you go, I don't mind one of Waddle or Hill in a Herbert lineup, but I don't want both Waddle and Hill in a Herbert lineup. I still want a game stack, but if I have Waddle Hill, I'd rather it be Tua. Well, how do you make it do that? That seems complicated. It isn't. You use the groups. So you could create a new group. And there's a thing here called conditional player. Use conditional player, which means the group will conform only when the conditional player is in the lineup. So let's say, you have that Waddle Hill example. So you have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Problem is in your lineups that you see the problem. I'm not saying it still could be fine. But let's say you don't want both of them if you only want them if Tua's the quarterback, sure, play both of them. But if Herbert's in, you don't want both of them. So you put them in the group, Hill, Waddle, max 1, min 0, max 1, and use the conditional player as Herbert. Right? So you're basically saying use group only in lineups that contain Justin Herbert. You could also use group in only lineups that do not contain Justin Herbert. You could do it whatever way you want. So basically this is saying if Justin Herbert is in the lineup, max 1 Hill Waddle. We could also do that for Deshaun Watson, right? If Watson is in the lineup, max 1 of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Right? Because you looked at the lines and go, well, if they're both going to be in there, I'd rather have Burrow up top. So we're not setting the groups to make it so that there's no way to say there's no conditional double player. If Chase and Higgins are in the lineup, then always use Burrow. There's no way to do that sequence. It's just the opposite of that. If the Watson, the other side, quarterback is in, don't play both of the expensive wide receivers. Right? So now we build lineups with these two groups. We'll put in 20. And the two players on the other side it's going to be for like the Dolphins, will be Tyreek Hill and Durham Smythe, or Waddle and Smythe, or something, or Mostert, or something like that. It won't play the two expensive wide receivers without their quarterback for those specific games, right? And let's say you won the stack like a lot of the games. Well, you'd look through and look at the lineups that you're building and see if there's any groups that you may need to make, that you may think that it's more beneficial for you to do so. Because now you see here, Watson, Moore, and Njoku with Mixon and Chase as the 2 run backs, right? Higgins and Irv Smith Jr. Let's find like a Herbert or a lineup. Herbert, Williams, Everett, Smythe and Hill on the other side. Now, you may look at this lineup and you go, do I really want a double tight end lineup? Well, maybe if you don't want to get this combination, you could go in. Obviously, if you set your flex exposure and build rules to like tight end 0%, you won't get these lineups at all. But let's say you want some of that, and you look and you go, maybe you set a group that Smythe and Everett can't be in the same lineup. You literally look. You don't have to set this beforehand. You go, oh, okay, I don't really like that combination. So you just go, okay, and I'll just create a group with Smythe and Everett, and I could build lineups that don't contain both tight ends from that game in the same lineup. Look through some of these other lineups to Croft Hill with Eckler and Williams as the run back. To Smythe Hill, right? Eckler Williams. Here's Cousins, Jefferson, Hawkinson with White and Godwin. To Waddle Hill with Williams and Eckler. Right? You also have to be a double tight end here. You got Luke Musgrave as a cheap tight end in that lineup. Right? Here's White, Otten, Cousins, Addison, Jefferson. Right? Now, these are like game stacky type of lineups. You don't have to build all game stack lineups. You go into the stacks, and I go add a primary stack. And go, I also want lineups that are, 3 from one side and just 1 from the other side. Quarterback, 2 wide receiver or tight ends. Hold on. 2 wide receiver tight ends, and then just 1 player from the other side of the game. Right? And you apply them to the same teams. You could do Tampa Bay, Minnesota, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Miami, Chargers. Let's say you want half and half. So you could just do 50% here and 50% there. And even on these, like if you take a look at like running back DST, maybe there's only certain running backs that you want to pair with the DSTs. So let's say Indianapolis, like you go through and you go, well, do I want Philadelphia running backs with Philadelphia DST? And maybe you don't. So you uncheck that box. Right? You can control that all in the stacks page. You don't have to worry about like the exposure percentages. Just go. It's like, no, I don't want to play the Carolina defense with the Carolina running back. Okay, well, uncheck it. There you go. Easy. Right? So now you're 50-50. You could do the same thing here with the secondary stacks. 1 wide receiver tight end from one side, 1 running back wide receiver tight end from the other side. Maybe there are certain games where it's just like, nope, I'm not taking 2 sides of the game. Nope. Arizona, Washington, nope. I'll take a 1 off. Not 2 guys from the game. 1 guy from Arizona, 1 guy from Washington. Well, then just uncheck them. You can do that. Right? So a lot of the time where I'm building my candidate lineups, and remember, I build a lot of lineups. A lot of the time I'm actually building 300 lineups per primary game stack. So a lot of times I'm not even using this like 50% of this and 50% of that. It's like, no, a lot of times I'm like locking in a quarterback or a game, and I'm saying, build me 300 lineups that look like this. And then go to the next game. Build me 300 lineups that look like this. Next game, 300, and then next thing you know, I have like 3,000 to 6,000 lineups, and then I could trail it from there. So you could do that also. If you want to try to build it all in one build, you could get as detailed as you want and what stacks you want, what groups you want. There may be certain combinations of players that you don't want in certain games. You may look. I mean, we go through. Maybe you look through and you go like that. Where was Indy? It was Indianapolis, right? With Zach Moss and Deion Jackson. We don't know with Jonathan Taylor what the hell's going on. He's not going to play the first 4 games, right? Maybe Zach Moss is going to be chalky. I'm just making an example. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Zach Moss at 4,200 is going to be like super uber chalk, or Deion Jackson or whatever, something like that. Like, do I want to use that as a one-off? Maybe you only want to play Zach Moss when a player on the other side of the game, right? To play him in a more correlated manner. So maybe you go into groups and you go, okay, conditional player Zach Moss, right? And then you take a look at all the players on the other side of the game, right? Kirk, All the receivers, especially Kirk, Ridley, Ingram, Jones, right? You get Kirk, Ingram, Ridley, Jones, right? And you just put them in the group. Kirk, Ridley, Ingram, Jones. What are you going to say? You're going to say you want a minimum of one and a maximum of two, or maximum of one if you just only want one. So you could do something like that. And you say, oh, Zach Moss is in the lineup. Give me at least one, at most two, of the Jacksonville pass catchers. Even if you're not playing, Trevor Lawrence or anything. I mean, just you could do that inside of your own lineups. Or just one. So, like, anytime you play Moss, you're going to get Ridley in that lineup, Kirk in that lineup, Ingram in that lineup, Zay Jones, one of those. Probably the ones that project better point per dollar than the ones that don't. This is a way to break apart that combinatorics of, like, a lot of Zach Moss lineups have this type of player in that game, and you get a little chalky. If you want to break up those combinations, this could be a way to do so. Of course, it means that you'll have no Zach Moss lineups that don't contain a Jacksonville wide receiver. But if you're fine with that, if that's what you want to build, this is what the groups are for. Right? If you want to build them with or without, you could just enable a group. You could change the names of groups. Right? You could duplicate groups. Like if you're building like, oh, how about this guy? And how about that guy? And if you want to build, 30 different groups, you just duplicate. It makes it easier. So you don't have to constantly type in people's names. You could also add them to the group on the page itself. So let's say, for instance, we have this group D, right? Right? And I have no one in there, right? So it's like, oh, group D, Zach Moss. I mean, even in here, there's this little group, little hamburger thing, right? Or whatever you want to call it. So I can add them to group D right there. Group D. Well, no, I can't add Zach Moss. I shouldn't add Zach Moss because he's a conditional player. So I could add it right there. I could add Ingram to group D. Zay Jones to group D. You go back to the groups page, and there you go. Right? You could rename them. I mean, you could rename any of these groups. There's a little pencil here. You could just put in the Zach Moss group. Called the Zach Moss group. Sounds like some type of consulting firm. Or the Zach Moss group. Right? And if you go to the player pool, you'll see. Maybe there's other. If you're getting too much of Jamal Agnew, you're probably not. But you go and you see right on the bottom it says Zach Moss group. You can even add people to groups from the player pool screen itself. Because I always suggest when you're building lineups that don't build them just like so many people focus on this min-max exposure. How much of this guy? How much of that guy? How much of this guy? How much of that guy? And then they focus on this screen of like, well, I got 25% of Chris Godwin. I got 55% of Kenneth Walker, and I got the 10% of Kate Otten, and they don't look at the actual lineups. Do the lineups make sense to what you want? You get all the Elijah Moore you want, but I mean, it's like, oh, it's Elijah Moore one-offs, and they're not in any of the Browns stacks. Like, is that what you wanted? The answer is no. Well, then you have to set rules in order to make the lineup builder give you what you want. Lineup builder isn't thinking. There's no thought process. It's choosing this guy. No. All it's doing is taking that FPTS column and saying, how do I fit all of that, as much of that number, into a lineup, given the salary, given the positions, and given whatever constraints that you put in. So if you put in constraints that are just absolutely asinine, right, it's going to give you the lineup. So, oh, here's a lineup that projects for 57 points lower than anything else. That's what you wanted. That's the best I could do. That's based on all the constraints. That's all a lineup builder is. Right? And this is just simple ways of efficiently telling the lineup builder what to do. It's not going to build stacks on its own. You have to tell it to. And in what percentage of what types of stacks, what teams. Do you need to have a secondary correlation? No. You don't need any of this. You'll see lineups that project well that have no correlation in it. That's fine. Remember, the balance of projection, correlation, and leverage is what DFS is. Oh, well, this lineup that won the big GPP, didn't have any correlation in it. It was a good projected lineup, though, right? Okay. Correlation just increases the variance of your lineup. It doesn't do anything else. So, like, you could play lineups that are 10 points lower projected, but you're going to make that up because you have, when one player does well, multiple other players in your lineup are more likely to do well. They won't necessarily do well, but they're more likely to. You're making up that mean projection by doing so. Playing lineups that project low, that have no correlation, and don't have less ownership, those are the worst lineups. You wouldn't build that. You can't make up a mean projection with, like, well, there's no leverage. Is that my ownership's still too high, and I have no correlation. It's like, well, if you're not going to have any leverage or correlation, you might as well just play the highest projected lineup then. Right? It's all about a balance. Projection, correlation, leverage. Combinatorics, like I mentioned before, making that group. So, yeah, everyone's playing Zach Moss and Justin Jefferson together in a lot of lineups. So how do I don't make those combinations, as many of those combinations? So I can still build lineups that are still well projected and reasonably owned, but don't have the same 6 guys in it. You don't mind a 3v3 off of that, but you see a lot of lineups are going to build, together. In the Theory of DFS for advanced players, where you can get at theoryofdfs.com, I have a tool in Excel called the Portfolio Correlation Matrix, where you can see those types of things. So a lot of times I will download projections from multiple sources, run them through Lineup HQ in just very base configurations, stack configurations, types of things, import them into the portfolio correlation tool as part of Theory DFS, and see what players stick to each other in lineups more than others. Because a lot of other people, they're not looking, they're playing, they're going, oh, what's the exposure? They're not paying attention to that. So there's going to be a lot more combinatorically represented lineups of certain combinations, and then those are the ones that I'm maybe looking to play less of. I use that as kind of a research tool. Then the portfolio trimmer is there also. So I'll build 3,000 lineups in Lineup HQ and then throw them all into the portfolio trimmer. Then I can trim by stack, right? Key player, quarterback. I could just trim. How many lineups am I playing? I'm playing 100 lineups. Okay, let's trim 3,000 down to 100. Trim. Right? So you get that at theoryofdfs.com. If you got any questions about Lineup HQ, you could always ask them in the Discord. There's a Lineup HQ-help channel. And you could also, ask me for more of the application of functions. Like if you have a problem figuring out how to do something specifically, like that's the Lineup HQ help channel. But if you like I'm trying to do and build lineups like this, and I'm getting a lot of that and blah, blah, blah. Like you understand all the functions and the application is giving you an issue. Why am I not getting enough of this and that? Am I doing something wrong? Like you could ask me that type of stuff in the Blenders Game Theory channel. That's part of the RotoGrinders Discord. You could join that now for nothing. Like some of our main sport channels they're free. You don't even have to be a premium member. To get in my channel, you got to be a premium member. But why wouldn't you sign up for that? Right? Sign up, get Lineup HQ. Get all of our premium content. Dude, during NFL season, there's gonna be 10 plus shows and videos and shorts and all the breakdowns of all the games, and then you got the tournament strategy articles and cash game picks and the rankings, and you get everything. So click on that link in the description, get $10 off your first month. I also believe that the NFL single only sport, I think they're running, you should have gotten an email if anything. I think they're running a sale or something for just NFL only for the entire season, like a season long, right? For 4 months or whatever. So you could check that out. Hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door. Give me those thummy thumbs, because I'll be away for a while. for a couple of days. So no show tomorrow, no show Friday, and no show the following Monday. So I'll be back Tuesday, right? I'm going up to Chicago for AEW All Out and the festivities that weekend. So I'll be leaving tomorrow. So no show. So you won't see my face. You won't see a thumbnail. They'll be back on Tuesday. And the show may look a little different on Tuesday. May look a little different on Tuesday, but you'll check that out then. Right? You'll see. You'll see what's going on. You'll see what's going on. So as always, hit that thumbs up button. You can always send in questions at theoryofdfs.com. And see what happens next Tuesday. I'll be back. Got baseball tonight, Grinders Live later. Hit that notification bell. You always know when any show on the RotoGrinders YouTube channel goes live. So I'm here answering your questions, right? I'm here. I'll be here even if I'm not answering your questions, right? Usually, outside of the next 3 days, right? I always make that preface. Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.